So yes, Anshul, we've got like 24 people who've joined in, and it's pretty late in India. So it's great to see everyone in there. Okay, so am I audible to everyone?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let me just do an introduction. So, hi everyone, welcome to the Finance Story Career Insights series, where we bring you stories, career insights, and market trends to enable you make better decisions for your career and organization. So, after looking at some data, I got to know that almost 50 CPA firms from the US, mostly the top 100 or the top 80, you could say, have started their satellite offices in India, and many other mid-size CPA firms with a revenue of around 70 to 100 million USD are considering a satellite office either in India, Mexico, or Philippines. So, to get a broader understanding of the opportunity that we can tap into, either as employees or as entrepreneurs, when it comes to CPA firms looking at India, we have with us Anshul Agarwal, who is the founder of June 15, a Toronto based consulting firm that advises and actually guides CPA firms who are considering starting a satellite office in India. So, from what I understand, talking to Anshul, it's from the consulting phase to actually the phase of setting up the office in India and running it for a couple of months. That's when Anshul is involved. So Anshul is the right person to help us understand the challenges, the thought process of US CPA firms who are considering starting in India, and what other opportunities does this open up. So Anshul, thank you so much for joining us on the Finance Story, and everybody who's joined in, thank you so much. Please send in your questions. As always, we'll take it right away. Thanks a lot, Anshul, for joining in.
Thank you so much, Chantal, for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. Anshul, just to start with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did June 15, start with, and what do you guys exactly do? From what I see, you're in Toronto, you studied in the US, and you're helping US CPA firms.
Yeah, so basically, I moved to the US in 2001. So I am from India, from a town called Indore in Madhya Pradesh. So after my schooling, I moved to the US to do my college, my MBA. And after working in the US for a couple of years, I moved to Canada in 2012. So that's when I started my own consulting firm. At that point, we were helping Fortune 500 companies with a lot of research to launch new products. And India became a big market for us because a lot of American firms wanted to get access to the Indian market, but they wanted somebody who understood the US and understood India. So that's why they reached out to me. So that's how this journey started. I did that for about 10 years. It was going really well until the pandemic. Pandemic sort of changed everything. Everything went online. Nobody was really looking to invest in new products at the time. So an old client reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, we are a CPA firm and we just cannot find accountants here." And they are a $15 million firm, so a lot smaller than your traditional big CPA firms. So they reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, can you help us set up an office in India?" And I was like, "I haven't done that before, but I have this dual cultural expertise, so I can do something like that." So that's how this pivot began. I started working with them, and I saw the opportunity was so big. There are no accountants in the US, and more are quitting every day, retiring every day. So that's sort of how I got into this part. And in terms of how I work with these firms, so it's really a consulting based model. They need somebody who can help them understand what India is all about. Is India a good fit? Where to go in India? What are the cultural differences? Basically, how to set up a team in India and how to get work done in India. So that's what we do. We work with them to build their entire team. So that includes, finding an office, determining where in India. It is a big country, right? Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, determining the city, finding an office for them, finding an India head for them. Um, then we move on to the operate part, training both sides on how to work with each other, right? That includes a lot of travel to India, a lot of cultural integration training. And when the client is ready, usually it takes 1 to 2 years for them to get there. Once they're ready, we transfer everything to them. That's when we take a step back and we're like, all right, you can take care of things on your own now. That's sort of what we do.
That's amazing. So, can you just tell me? I understand it's more in lines of consulting, right? So, how big is this opportunity for somebody who wants to enter a phase, enter into a consulting space like yours? How
Ooh,
big is it, and what are the typical
huge.
challenges? Okay.
Yeah, see, the opportunity is huge, right? When I look at my revenue projections, like getting somewhere between 10 to 20 million US dollars a year, I mean, I can see that right now. I mean, it's not going to happen in the next 1 to 2 years, but that's how big the opportunity is. Um, there's, I think, close to 1,000 CPA firms in the US that are over 50 people or over 10 million in revenue. And it's these firms that are right to come to India. And even like a small engagement with them. So the opportunity is huge. Like it's in the millions, tens of millions, I would say. And that's just CPA firms. Then you can look at other financial adjacent financial services, wealth management, insurance. There's just so much. Um, and that takes the opportunity like even like bigger. It makes it bigger. Um, so your next question was about challenges, right?
Yeah.
What challenges?
Yeah. Can I just dig in a little bit? So when you say the opportunity as a consultant is huge, like you can project 10 to 20 million in the next 2 to 3 years, because so do you mean to say so many of these financial services, including CPA firms, are looking at setting up their offices in India? So it and that's a percentage of, so how is the remuneration like? Like, so how do they compensate a consulting firm?
It depends, right? It really depends on every engagement. Every engagement is different, but the fundamental rule here is you charge based on the value you're providing, right? So my philosophy is I go to clients, I tell them, hey, if you go to India, you're going to save, depending on how big of a team they are, you're going to save at least 50% on salaries. And then you're going to make more money because right now you're turning away work because you don't have accountants. Now you'll have as many accountants in India as you need. So you don't have to turn away work. So with every client, I try to size up their savings versus how much they're going to make. And then you charge based on that, right? You say, if I'm saving you $100, I'll charge you $50, something like that. So that's why I say the opportunity is huge. And there's many business models you can follow, but this is the one that I like.
Okay, okay. Thank you for this. I mean, that's some great insights, Anshul. Would you also want to highlight what are the typical challenges as a consultant? What cannot go the way you expect.
So there's many things, right? It comes down to three main things, right? Experience, trust, and differentiation. First thing is you need to be able to prove the client that you have the experience, you have the expertise to help them, right? So that they need to know that you understand the US, but you also understand India. They need to know that I will understand what they want from India, and I'll be able to tell the India team how to give it to the US side. So that's the experience part of it. The second part is trust, right? A lot of CPA firms are, well, almost all are extremely risk averse. Right? I mean, by nature, right? They are cautious. They don't want to do anything that makes their clients or their leadership nervous. So my job is to make sure to build that trust, and that's a very challenging part because it takes time. So I've been speaking with CPA firms since last October, September, October, and we're still having conversations, right? They tell me every time we talk, they're like, we're still interested, Anshul. We want to do this, but it's taking time for them to trust me to get themselves to a place that, all right, we're ready to do it. And the third one is differentiation, right? There's a lot of people who want to do what I'm doing, right? So I have to figure out a way, how do I differentiate from other Anshuls who are trying to do the same thing? So me being here in Canada helps a lot, but still, like there's a lot of people trying to do that. So these are the three buckets of challenges anybody who wants to do this will face.
Okay, okay, amazing. If anyone of you have questions, please let us know. We'll take it right away. So Anshul, can you take us, through your entire journey of approaching a CPA firm? Because as you said, trust is a very important factor. In spite of being in the consulting space in US and Canada for what, since 2004, 5, right? You still say that CPA firms take their time to build that trust, to understand more about Anshul, right? So can you take us, through your journey of approaching these firms? How do you hold on to that patience, because it's taking time, okay? And what's the onboarding process like, and how do you know, are you also involved with them when it comes to deciding if they should move to India? It's only after they have decided that you're a part of it, and then how do you also connect it to India? Like, who are the people you work with in India? What kind of people? So if you can take us through this entire chain, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. So the first thing is I call it the pre-contract phase. So this is when I will get in touch with a CPA firm, and it's usually through a contact we have in common, right? That helps with the trust part. So even with my first client, right, the person who introduced me to that firm, he knew me for the past 10 years. I've been working for him on and off for the past 10 years. So he trusted me. So he introduced me to that firm. And that part really involved understanding what they're expecting from their India office and what their fears are. And sometimes their expectations are okay, sometimes they're maybe overblown. So you have to work to temper those expectations that, hey, you can save 50%, but if you're planning to save 70, 80%, that may not happen, right? If you want to scale your team from 10 to 100, it may take a couple of years. So working with them to set the right expectation and then understanding what the fears are. The biggest fear for most CPA firms is just the fear of unknown. Like they know India is an up and coming country. They know we have good talent, good infrastructure, but there's still that fear because they've never been to India. Most likely, they've only heard about us. So helping them address their fears one by one, that takes time. Sometimes weeks, sometimes like months, more likely months. And then it's not just one person who takes the decision, right? They have several partners, several owners. So you have to work to address everyone's issues. And that's when patience is required. So it's hard. It does get hard at times. I get frustrated. I was like, we just talked about this last time. I thought we were good. So there is no other way. There's no way out. You just have to be patient. And once the fears are done, the expectations are in line, we work on like an ROI analysis. How much is it going to cost you to set up an office in India? How long till you can see an ROI? What are your risks? Like, let's assume it doesn't work. How much money would you lose? So all of those things. Once we go through all of them, then they're ready to sign a contract. So before I talk about what happens after, like this, can I clarify something so far?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about then. Once the contract is signed, right? Then basically, instead of a consultant, I become a member of their team. I'm talking to them on almost on a daily basis, helping them figure out, all right, where do we go in India? Now we've decided India works for us, but do we want to go to Bangalore, Mumbai, Ahmedabad? I work with them to figure that out. What kind of an office space do we want? Do we want to work with a co-working space or do we want something on our own? How much is that going to cost? Then I work with an interior designer or a contractor um, who helps us, with quotes. If we decide to go forward with an office construction, he's the one who project manages everything. Then we move on to the recruitment part of it. Okay, we need to hire a head of India. So I've worked with recruiters in India. I use my network. I use LinkedIn to get resumes. I know some people who have already reached out to me who I know would be a good fit for like a director of operations in India. So we start with that process because the India head is the most important hire. Once we have that nailed down, then we go on and start building the team that they want. The foundational team can be anywhere from 10 to 30 people, maybe even more. And it's sort of like a rinse and repeat process, right? Working with their HR team, showing them how to interview people in India, what to look for, what are some red flags. And then we go from like, okay, we wanted to have an office in India to like having a fully furnished office and their foundational team. That's sort of what we do. Um,
Okay, okay. So it's basically from. So my point is, when you're also consulting them before the contract is signed, do you get compensated for that, or that's
no,
no? Okay, so that's a lot of patience then.
that's a lot of time, a lot of patience. Like eventually, I will bill them for it, right? It's all inbuilt, right, in my pricing, but that's a risk I have to take. Um, and yes, there have been clients where I've spent, or prospects, I should say, where I've spent so much time and then they've just gone silent. So that's just the way entrepreneurship works. You're not going to win every client, and you may even get burned at the end, but there's no way around it. You just have to take that with the success you'll get.
True that, true. You just mentioned right now, you also look into one of the aspects is what's the cost of setting up an office in India? Where do you set up? Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Hyderabad? How do you decide? So, can you take us through those, the how parts that you have to solve for them, right? So, how do you decide
Mm.
what CPA firm needs what and what city or what kind of office? How
Sure.
do you decide on that? Yeah.
So there are two things. There's logic and there's emotion. So let's talk about logic first, right? Logic starts with how big of a team do you want to set up in India? How much are you willing to spend on overheads, right? So that's where it starts. So I always recommend clients if they're looking to set up a slightly smaller team, like 25 or maybe even less than 50, choosing a city like Ahmedabad is great. It has already has a lot of CPA firms. One challenge that I've found my clients faced in Ahmedabad was finding senior executives. You'll still find them, but it takes time, right? So that's where the logic part ends, right? If you're setting a very big team, then maybe Mumbai or Bangalore would be better. I usually tell people to choose Mumbai because there's a lot of benefits in choosing Mumbai. It's a financial capital, amazing English skills, great infrastructure, and I feel like Bangalore has become more expensive than Mumbai now. So it just, in my opinion, just doesn't add up. Mumbai is a better choice. Then there's the emotion part of it. How nervous are the managing partners? How nervous are the leadership when they're looking at India? Because asking them to choose a city like Ahmedabad, it comes with risks, right? Because people would not have heard of Ahmedabad. It's hard for them to say Ahmedabad, right? But Mumbai, people know Mumbai. It has a very good brand on a global scale. So if someone's really nervous, then I'd be like, all right, let's just go to Mumbai, where it's safe. You'll pay a little more premium in real estate, maybe a little more in salaries, but you won't have to give a lot of explanations to your clients, to your employees. Um, so that's sort of how I go about working with clients. If someone's willing to take a risk or if they're more adventurous, sure, let's go to Ahmedabad. Let's go to even smaller cities if you want. But then they have to be okay with the challenges that come with it. So that's sort of how we decide which city to choose.
Okay, okay. And what's the typical cost of, say, if you're a mid-sized firm and if you want to start an office in India, say Ahmedabad or in Mumbai, what's the typical cost that involves from the team to the office space? Like, what would be the investment?
So again,
Around.
it depends on the size of the team and it depends on how fast you want to move it up. But generally, the average salary for a skilled accountant in India who has experience working for US firm is about 25,000 US dollars. Freshers you'd get for somewhere between 12 to 15,000. Director of India, I mean, that really depends, right? It could go as high as you want it to go, but the average is 25,000. So that's the investment you're looking at. If you're looking to set up a team of 25, 10, right? So your salary would be 250,000 USD. The overhead isn't a whole lot, right? Even if you look at rent, right, that's $1 per square foot in Ahmedabad, maybe $2 in Mumbai. So for a team of 10, it's not going to be a deal breaker or a decision maker. It's really the salaries that you're looking at. So that's the investment, I would say. $25,000 per person. That's a good benchmark to start with.
Okay, okay, that's amazing. And so if I'm a CPA firm, okay, I've decided in India, I've had the budget, and we've gone back and forth for a year, and we're like, okay, let's decide on Ahmedabad or Mumbai or Bangalore. Okay, so what are the risks that that if I'm a CPA firm that I have to take into consideration? Every CPA firm or every capability center doesn't succeed. So
Yep.
what helps in the success and what leads to failure? And what are the fears of these CPA firms, or you could say the risk that they have to account for?
So let's talk about the risk and the fears first. The biggest fear is just the fear of unknown. So I mentioned this before, and that That's what I hear from managing partners again and again, that we just don't know what we don't know. Just think of it like if you were to travel to a foreign country that you've never been, even if it doesn't matter if it's a developing country or a developed country, you'll have fears, right? What's going to happen at the airport? Yes, I'll get a cab, but what if something goes wrong? Right? How do I find a good place to stay? Like, how do I find food to eat? All of those things, right? So, business has similar concerns as well. So, they know that a lot of firms have gone to India, but they're still not sure what it would look for them. Are my clients going to get nervous that we're shipping work to India? Are my employees going to think that our jobs are being shipped overseas? Um, is uh, is it going to cost us more than what we have thought? Like, what were we going to do in those situations? We don't have any legal recourse. Yes, we could go to courts in India, but do we really want to do that? And managing partners also have like they're sort of like precedents, right? It's not they're not going to stay there forever, so they have other things that they need to think about. So these are some fears that they have. And in terms of challenges, just getting everyone on board, that's a big challenge. What I see is, let's say the leadership, uh, there are 10 leaders in a CPA firm. So five maybe like, let's go to India. Three maybe like, I don't know, maybe. And two would be like, we're never going to do that. So getting everyone on board, that's a big challenge, right? And when you do get the majority on board, you still have to think about people who are not on board, right? You have to make sure that their concerns are addressed. So that's a big part of it. Talking to your employees, right? Showing them or telling them that it's not really going to change anything. Allaying their fears. So that is also a challenge. And then there's a stigma attached to offshoring.
Yep.
Right? A lot of US firms are hesitant. They don't quite understand that a lot of work is being done in India, right? Especially the smaller the firm, the less experience they have with global teams. So that stigma is also a challenge that they need to overcome, not just for themselves, their leaders, their employees, maybe even their clients. So those are some challenges that they need to overcome, and that's where there's an opportunity for me, for others, to step up and help them navigate them through these challenges, navigate them through these difficult waters, get them to a place where they're like, okay, I think we feel better.
Okay, okay, that's amazing. To just double click on this, then, for instance, if you approach 10 CPA firms and you're talking to, like, say, 10 of them, or say six of them, or five of them, what is the percentage of CPA firms that actually convert and actually, take this bold step to move to another country? As you mentioned, for us, it's like, okay, India is the place, everyone's starting their satellite offices. But when you're talking about mid-sized firms, it is a big decision, right? Many of them have not even been to India. So, if you
It's
want to highlight
hard
that.
to say. I don't think I have enough data to say how many convert in terms of percentages. What I can say is, like, of all the conversations that I'm having so far, I would say at least half seem to be very interested. The other half, they understand it, but they're very cautious right now. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's no like percentage or something, but a lot they don't really have an option at this point, right? There are no accountants in the US. It's not getting better. So everybody's under pressure to explore creative and innovative ways to solve their talent pipeline issue. So we get a lot more positive responses in terms of we want to talk. I think by the end of this year, we'll have a better handle on how many we actually convert. So we'll see.
Okay, amazing. I think it's very important for me to ask you this question. Can you take us through the current landscape in the US, when it comes to CPA firms? Like, what are the large, mid-sized, small firms? What is the categories like? And who are the ones who are actually looking at India, Philippines, or Mexico? And how do they decide on which country? You know,
Sure.
and what? Yeah.
So I can talk about how I categorize firms. I
Yeah.
categorize firms based on their size. Size I look at in terms of revenue and employees. Um, so there's top 30 CPA firms, right? You can get that list online. They usually have a revenue of 100 million plus. And then I look at mid-sized firms as between 10 and 100 million in revenue. And then smaller firms who are less than 10 million. So for smaller firms, the opportunity is more in terms of outsourcing as opposed to their own office because they don't have a big enough need where they need their own office. So anybody who's looking to enter this space, that's a very good entry point. And then you can tie up with one or two firms. You'll get good seasonal work, and if you're able to prove your work, they give you more and more work, and not just from their firm, but from other firms as well. Then the mid-sized firms, right, 10 to 100 million, that is the segment that's my sweet spot because these firms are most likely already working with outsourcing companies. They have outgrown the outsourcing companies where they feel like we give enough work to have, 10, 15 people of our own. And at this point, their clients also start asking, right? They start asking more about, all right, who's doing our work in India? What's going on? So at this point, it's much easier for firms to say that, hey, it's our own people, right? We have hired them, we've vetted them. So it just makes it easier. And at this point, like firms that are in this revenue range, they're the ones under a lot of pressure to grow revenue, right? Because they're sort of reaching saturation. They may be reaching saturation in their current geography, current lines. So India gives them that opportunity where if they have a team that doesn't cost as much as the US, but that's just as smart, right? That they can adjust prices, they can offer new services. So that's the ideal category of firms who are looking to set up their own office.
Amazing. So now there's two kinds of opportunities. One is for offshoring, and the other one is where you help satellite offices actually help CPA firms actually set up their satellite offices in India, which is also a very big market to look into. So when you say 10 to 100 million, so there would be how many mid-sized CPA firms, in the US?
My estimate is close to 1,000.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this is so I'm looking at both US and Canada. The plan is to expand to other Western European countries as well. But yeah, I'm looking at 1,000 firms right now.
Amazing. Amazing. And when you talk about small firms,
Oh, maybe more than 100,000 or something. I think I read a statistic that there's 200 or 300,000 small accounting firms in the US. Um, but again, like my focus is more mid-sized firms. The smaller firms, I think there's enough outsourcing companies in India that do it. But the opportunity is still there, but that's not the one I'm pursuing.
wow. So the opportunity for folks who are looking at outsourcing is still massive. If you say like 200,000, that's huge. That's a big
It's
number.
still massive. It's a very big number, and that's just US and Canada, right? Then you have like the rest of the world. The challenge when you do that would be how, again, it'll come down to differentiation. Like, how are you different than the firms that are already established in India? I get like one message a week from somebody who's starting an outsourcing firm that, hey, can you introduce us to clients here? And I always tell them that if something comes across, I will share it with you. But the challenge there would be differentiation. But it's an easier start.
Amazing. That's great. Okay, so I have this. Yeah, I guess we did address this. Is there any particular kind of CPA firm that show promise for considering India? Like, I've when I was looking at a couple of US CPA firms just before we could speak. There's CPA firms only focused on dentists. There's CPA firms only focused on real estate, which is not so common in India,
Mhm.
right? So, what do you think are the CPA firms what kind of industry do they focus on, or are they general CPA firms?
I think the industry doesn't really matter as much. The only thing that matters is if they work with the government, right? If they work with the federal government or like a state government, they may have clauses where they cannot open an office outside of the US. So they probably would be a good fit. I've come across firms where they were like, well, we work with the Defense Department in the US. So they're not going to work with us. That's just not going to happen. But other than that, it's pretty industry agnostic because people can train you, right? If they're focused on real estate, dentists, manufacturing companies, they'll train you. Even with my client, right, we did not focus on industry. We were like, we'll get talented people and we'll spend time training them. So I don't think the industry matters. Not even like geography. I don't think some states like that have like a higher population of internet or global people or Indian people. They just have a lot more exposure. See, there's a case to be made that, New York or Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, the firms there would be slightly more open because they've already worked with a lot of Indians or internationals. But in my experience, I've not seen that to be the case, right? I've reached out to firms where there's not a whole lot of diversity, but they're also okay. Yeah. For me, it's really that revenue bracket. I feel that is a good place. Those firms are very, very well ripe to open offices in India.
Amazing. And when you talk about, since we're still talking about the US landscape, it's everywhere. There's some 300,000 plus accountants, quit, or there's a shortage of accountants. Would you want to share a little bit of insights? Why did that happen, and how long will this continue for, and like why is it happening? You know.
It's a bunch of factors, right? The first one is most CPA firms, the owners are old, nearing retirement, right? So their kids or the newer generation, they're not interested in accounting because it's not a glamorous profession, right? People don't make as much money as accountants compared to, let's say, in the tech world. So that's where the new generation is going. They're more interested in technology as opposed to accounting, which is a shame because accounting is like a safe profession,
Yeah.
right? You'll get a job, it's safe. It may not pay really, really big, but it's still decent. So that's one reason, right? A lot of people are retiring, not enough people are coming into the profession. The second is also the work-life balance in a CPA's life is very weird, right? Busy seasons, they're working at 60, 70 hours a week. Um, a lot of the new generation isn't quite okay with that. People want to work from home. CPAs are very traditional. They're not okay with working. A lot of firms are not quite there yet. They still feel in-person traditional models work better. So that needs to happen. The, the the reputation of the industry as a whole isn't very glamorous, so that needs to be fixed. That's why we're running into this crunch where a lot of people are retiring, not enough people are taking the exams, and like with options like India, right? There's less incentive for companies to change, right? Um, when you have this big pool of talent in a foreign country, but that's working well, right? So I don't think we're going to solve the accountant shortage problem. That's my opinion. I don't think it's going to get solved, at least not in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. Okay. And do you see a lot of, for instance, do you see the US hiring a lot of accountants, from say India or other countries to work in the US? Do you see that happening, or again, that won't make sense financially?
So I do see people hiring international students right out of school. But the challenge is that you get, I think, 2 or 3 years of visa-free work in the US. But after 3 years, like you have to focus on the H-1B, and the approval rate there is like 10 or 11%. And these mid-sized firms are then competing for an H-1B spot with Google, Amazon, Apple. There's no way they're going to win, right? So I think it does address a short-term need that I need somebody in my office today, right? I cannot wait 2 years for the India office to pay off. But uh, what I'm hearing from managing partners is they don't see that as a sustainable solution. I think that's part of the solution they're looking at, but that's not going to address their long-term problems.
Okay, okay. We'll take this question from Manoj. He says, do mid-size CPA firms focus on specific services like bookkeeping, auditing, etc.?
Um, I haven't seen that, right? Most firms I've seen with offer like the tax services, auditing services. They're branching out into new services, and that's where India can play a pivotal role, right? HR consulting, technology consulting, just client advisory services. So what's been stopping them from doing this has just been lack of people. There's just not enough people. But that's how a lot of firms are planning to use their India office. First, they're going to get their tax and A&A department in order. And as soon as that's going to happen, they're going to start adding these services. There's a lot of pressure on CPA firms to move away from just tax and audit work and become more well-rounded professional services firms. So that's what's happening. What's interesting with bookkeeping is not profitable for US CPA firms. So they're looking at an India office to be able to provide bookkeeping too. Because a bookkeeper in the US would be 30 or not 30, maybe even more, for close to $40,000 a year. But in India, that person would be $12,000 a year. And like I'm talking about like a very good skilled bookkeeper in India. So the economics suddenly start to make sense. So my prediction is more and more CPA firms that have offices in India are going to offer services like bookkeeping, HR consulting, technology consulting. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Manoj, I hope this answers your question. We have a next question from Prashant. He says proprietorship firms in India have 10 to 12 years of experience. How will they be able to connect with US CPA firms, and how do they get their trust to get the work from them?
So patience and persistence, right? It's going to take a while. I started doing this in 2022, and it's been 2 years, and now I'm starting to see a lot of traction. So Chantal, we were talking before we went live that this year I'm hoping to bring at least six firms to India. But it took 2 years of just reaching out to them, building their trust. So in terms of answering the question, how you can connect, there's no one way, right? LinkedIn is a great resource, right? Follow the people that you want to connect with. Um, when they're posting articles, comment, connect with them on LinkedIn. Keep in touch with them, right? Keep sending them stuff, right? What I do is I keep sending my prospects every few weeks. I'll send them a link to a video or an article that I think would be helpful for them. So you'll have to do that for several months before they start to notice that, okay, this person is persistent and they seem to be providing value. The second about trust, if you have somebody in the US, a friend or a family member, ask them for referrals. That is the best way to build trust and build trust fast. The other way is make sure your online profiles or your online presence is noticeable. Right. One thing I do is I post articles, I post videos. I have a point of opinion. Not everybody agrees with what I say, but when clients see that you are active online, and that's really mainly LinkedIn, then they'll start to trust you more. So you add a connection that you may have, you add the fact that you are very vocal and active online, and with the fact that you've been trying to engage with them. So you do that for several months, and then you'll slowly start to gain their trust. If your budget allows for it, travel to the US, right? Um, May and June is a great time to travel. Try to attend conferences if you can. Um, that will also help build trust. If clients can see you in flesh, that helps.
Okay, okay. I hope this helps, Prashant. But that's well noted. Anshul. So, Anshul, I have this question for you, which says, like, there are so many CA firms in India. Do you work with CA firms as well for to help in setting up the office or stuff like that, or you work with, as you mentioned, a recruiter or an advisor? How does it work on that front?
So I have a list of strategic partners, a network of strategic partners in India. So I do work with a couple of CA firms in India, and one of them advises me and my clients on any FEMA, RBI, foreign exchange related matters, transfer pricing. So that's one part of it. The other one is just local compliance, right? GST, income tax, all of that. So I have a CA firm that helps me with those things. Then I work with a few recruiters. Everybody has different strengths. They help me with sourcing. I know some recruiters are good with volume, some recruiters are better with senior executives. And then I also have a couple of team members in India who help me with the operations, right? So one thing we do is fraud management, right? That's a big concern for accounting firms. Like what happens to the money that's in my bank, right? How do we make sure that there's no fraud? So we have somebody who oversees those transactions for our clients. We have somebody who helps with procurement, right? Procurement is a big thing. Making sure the computers are there, any tech equipment, what happens if something breaks down. We work with a travel agency who helps with all the travel arrangements. Now, for you and me, right, traveling, I don't think we'll use a travel agency. We could just go online, do everything. But you have to think about somebody who's never traveled overseas, right? They definitely I find working with a travel agent very helpful. Right? So it's a network of strategic partners, right? Compliance, technology, HR, travel that we work with that make it easier for the client and for us.
Okay, amazing. So, is there any scope for a few other CA firms to probably connect with you? And are you looking out for CA firms who could be a part of your network? And what kind of CA firms do you look for? Should they be mid-size? Should they, they could have a smaller team? What is it in particular?
So size doesn't matter. Like in terms of CA firms, I have the firms that I currently work with, they're smaller firms.
Yeah.
I need to be able to trust that person. I need to be able to trust their experience, their expertise. That's what matters. In terms of working with me, I mean, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always looking to talk to accountants, CA firms, strategic partners in India who can help me provide value to my clients. I tell CA firms if it's something that I don't do, I'm more than happy to connect them directly with my clients as well. Um, so the opportunity for CA firms is twofold, right? One, they can set up their own outsourcing team, and they work with the smaller CPA firms in the US to get, tax work, audit work during busy season. That's one. And the other is working with firms who want to set up their own office. So that includes you could either work with somebody like me who's advising them, or if you are able to get in touch with the CPA firm directly, maybe advise them directly. But that's how I see CPA firms capitalizing on this opportunity.
That's amazing. So I have this question for you, I think, and after that I'll just take the last one. How does the regulatory environment in India, affect the establishment and operations of CPA firms?
It's challenging for sure. So I think the regulatory environment in India is improving, right? A lot of things are getting digitized, a lot of red tape is being cut. But still, when you compare it to what the environment is in the US, like it's still very complex. Um, and that's what scares a lot of US CPA firms. They've heard horror stories. They just compare everything to the US. The US, I mean, I don't think regulation or compliance is easy anywhere in the world, but US is still easier for them because it's home ground, right? So it does become a bit challenging for CPA firms. One of the things we have done is we work with our clients and we become their employer of record. So we take care of all the compliance until the client is ready to, take all of that on their own. For CA firms looking for opportunity here, if you can figure out a way to make the compliance super easy for people like me, or even for accounting firms or other firms in the US, there's a big opportunity there. And when I say simple, right, I mean clearly laid out. This is what you need to do on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. This is how much time it'll take. This is how much it would cost. These are some risks associated with it. These are some late fees. If you can lay it out very precisely, concisely, clearly, there's a big opportunity there. But at the end of the day, these are accounting firms, right? They deal with regulatory environment in the US, so they know that, and their office in India will be staffed with CAs, so they know that they can handle any regulation that comes their way. It's just that it makes them nervous at times, and that's one of my jobs is to help them. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna take care of it. Don't worry about it. So stuff like that.
Okay. Uh, any examples where an office or CPA firm that started in India, things didn't go right for them and they had to wind up? Like anything that comes to your mind?
So I have examples more in technology. Well, so for CPA firms as well. So I'm not going to name them, but there's a top 30 CPA firm. They opened their office in India a few years back. Um, they, I don't think they chose the right city. I don't think they were able to find the right director of operations, and they did not invest enough in understanding the cultural differences between the two countries, right? And because of that, it didn't go well at all. They spent a lot of time and effort getting their India office up to speed, and in the end, they just had to sell their India office to another firm. And the other firm that bought it, they are doing very well with the same office. So there are cases where things didn't quite go well. And it comes down to, again, lack of understanding of the Indian culture, not choosing the right leadership in India, and not having the right time frame. Like if you expect results within a year, that's just not going to happen. There are more examples from the technology world, right? We have seen fraud happening where the director of operations in India um, just ran away with a lot of money from the bank account because that person is legally is a legal representative of the foreign firm in India. They have access to bank accounts. It's their number, their email addresses everywhere for OTPs and everything. So I've heard quite a few cases like that in technology. Not so much in CPA so far because we're still in the nascent stage. Um, but clients do worry about that, like what to do, what not to do. Um,
Okay, okay, and that's fair enough. I mean, it's scary, right? Entering into a new zone and hiring people of a totally different culture, and it's a lot of time and money that's invested. I want to ask you this question: when you talk about cultural differences, like when we were even speaking earlier, you mentioned there's a lot of cultural differences. You have to really earn your trust, and you have to build trust, and you have to be patient. Like for instance, sometimes when it comes to India, we're not, things, it's either a yes or no pretty quickly, in most cases, right? So would you want to highlight a little bit about the culture that we should be aware of when approaching the CPA firms?
so, I mean, if you're looking at CPA, like one of the biggest cultural differences that I see is here in India, we're not that good at setting expectations. We don't like giving bad news, right? We want to paint the best picture of, you know, what the best case scenario would look like if somebody were to come to India. So that is something we need to move away from, right? There will be challenges, right? That's just unavoidable. One of the things that my client later told me that they really appreciated was the fact that I told them upfront that India is not going to be easy. India is not for first timers, right? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You need to go in. I laid out quite a few challenges that they could expect to face. Compliance related challenges, talent retention challenges. Um, so I've seen a lot of time the vendors, the firms that reach out to me from India, they forget that we know that we will run into problems, right? And it is okay to bring up those problems and have a solution to it, right? Come up with a strategy that, okay, we know that retention is tough in India, but here's how we can make it better for you. So those things would help with trust, right? Because a lot of times people just say, oh, everything's perfect, you're not going to run into any issues, and that not only we lose trust because of that, that's a big thing.
Yep.
The other thing I would say to the talent in India, right? People who are looking for jobs, ask questions. Right? Culturally, I feel in India we were told not to ask questions, especially to our superiors, not to challenge them in a public forum. But those things are rewarded in the US.
Yep.
So leaders will look at people who ask them questions, who challenge them as, all right, this person is so engaged. Right? They really care about what we're trying to do as a firm. So that's one thing. Ask questions. Don't wait till the call is over. Don't wait till the deadline is near to ask questions. If you don't agree with what the US person is saying, bring it up in a respectful way, but do bring it up. So it's just small things like this, right? That'll help you gain an edge.
Okay, so you don't have to be like you don't have to be pleasing, you're like a people pleaser. You can be direct, you can be honest. You don't have to sugarcoat. They're more
Yep,
okay with being direct than being unnecessary polite. Like sometimes you
agreed.
can be overly polite and sugary. So you want to highlight on that?
Absolutely. So I see like a lot of emails from employees to my US side, very big emails and full of emotional stories and how happy they are and all of that. I think that's not needed, right? Because in the US, people don't really share a lot of personal information. One thing we see in interviews as well is people start sharing a lot of personal information too soon. And that just scares like Americans. They're not used to that, right? So stick to the point, be concise, and by all means, like if you're not okay with what they're saying, right, you don't have to agree with them. I don't agree with my clients at all, like a lot of times. And we've had heated conversations with my clients where they're saying, let's do this in India. I'm like, Don't do that in India. And in the end, like, sure, the client is the boss, so we'll do what they say, but they appreciate the fact that I challenged them.
Okay. Okay, that's amazing. We've got two more questions. I'll just take these questions from Akib. He says, do you think US presence is needed for Indian offshoring firms if they want to grow beyond, say, 20 people?
It's not needed, but it is recommended, right? Um, so you don't have to have like an office, but if you have somebody in the US who works for you, even part-time, right, that helps a lot. Because having somebody in their time zone, having somebody that they can hold responsible, accountable when something goes wrong, or if they have quick question, it goes a long way. But it's not needed. Like I don't have anyone, like I don't have like an office in the US. Like I'm in Canada, that's still a different country, right? So clients still ask me like, oh, how is that going to work? How will contracts be executed? I have no plans to register my company in the US as of yet. So a US presence in terms of having a team member or two, definitely recommended.
Okay, okay, that's amazing. So Akib, I have spoken to a lot of offshoring firms who have a team of say 200 and 300 in India, but they've got zero, they have no employees in the US. Of course, they've got representatives who go and get them, business, and many of them have not even been to the US, but they've got reps there. And I don't know, they probably have an office, but not a big team at all, maybe one or two. Probably I can connect you to somebody, Akib. So that's there. I have this other question which has come on my WhatsApp. It says, can due diligence and data room work be outsourced?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can talk more about due diligence. So I think a lot of wealth management firms, they are looking to do just that. They want analysts in India who can help with due diligence. And absolutely, here's how I look at what can be outsourced. There's the talent angle. Is there a place, industry in the US, in the professional services realm, where there's not enough talent, right? That can be outsourced. Is there something that can be done better in India? So things like due diligence, I still feel it can be done much better in India. Is there something that can be done, for a lower cost without compromising the quality? That is something that can be outsourced. So that's how I look at it. Another thing to look at is if you pick any industry, like start with technology. What are some things that are being outsourced in the tech world? And then see if other industries can outsource some of those things as well. So
Yeah.
absolutely, due diligence can be outsourced.
Okay. What about working with private equity firms? I mean, what's your take on that?
So that is a very, very interesting area for me too. I'm getting more interest from private equity firms than CPA firms. Private equity firms who are looking to buy CPA firms, one of the first things they want to do is we want to open an offshore office, right? So I'm talking to a couple right now, and we're in the process. So private equity firms, their mandate is to create value for companies that they're looking to buy. How do you create value? One of the things is by cutting costs. One of the other things is by increasing access to the talent pool. India does both, right? So working with private equity firms, regardless of the industry, has a huge potential. And even for due diligence, right? You can help private equity firms with due diligence pre-deal as well. So pre-deal, post-deal, um, I almost feel like what I am doing, the satellite office model, I think the bigger opportunity, even for me, is private equity firms. So that's something I've tabled for next year. But if you have contacts in the private equity world, reach out to them, talk to them about how they're thinking about creating value for their portfolio companies, talk to them about some challenges they're facing, and see if that can be addressed with outsourcing or offshoring.
Amazing. That's great. And when you're talking about private equity firms and CPA firms, how do you link them? You said private equity firms are looking at CPA firms to buy them. So that
So,
doesn't happen in India, from what I understand. But
yeah,
yeah,
so it's a new trend that's happening in the US in the last couple of years. If you look at the number of deals, the size of deals, it's going up because private equity firms, they look at industries that are traditional, that have not had a lot of disruption, that are extremely fragmented. And that's what most CPA firms are. They're extremely regional, local, not a lot of incorporation of technology. Um, they haven't really changed a lot in the last 50 years. And that's why sort of they're in this mess right now. So private equity firms, they're looking to buy two or three smaller uh, accounting firms and then create one big firm. And once they have that firm, they look to add value to that. And that's where offshoring comes in. So it's there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the CPA world. Bigger firms buying smaller CPA firms. The interesting thing is the buyers almost always have an office in India. So they know that when they're buying a book, the book of business of a smaller firm, they're not just buying their book, they have the talent to service that book of business too.
Amazing. That's some great information. Cool. So, would you have any closing message, Anshul, for everyone listening to you and who's going to listen to you later on as well? And
Absolutely. Anyone who's looking to, start a business or, get into the CPA world in India as an employee, right? Start now. This is a great time, right? There's an acute shortage in the US. Firms are under a lot of pressure to explore creative, innovative ways to solve their talent issues. India model is already proven, right? Like 50 firms already have their offices in India. So a lot of work has been cut out. India is the preferred destination over Philippines and Mexico and Argentina, Poland. Like just India is leaps and bounds ahead of everyone. So this is the right time to start. I know it may seem overwhelming, but you have to be patient. But if you're patient, persistent, and you find a way to differentiate yourself, I can almost guarantee that you'll start finding work. And the good thing is you don't have to go all in right away. Right? I have spoken to so many people who want to get into this, but they only want to do it part time, and that's completely okay. So yeah, and anybody if they need any advice, have any questions, like you can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
yeah, yeah, cool. So Anshul, thank you so much. You've answered every question with 100% honesty. Because a lot of folks watching this might also start something similar, but you've been so genuine and honest with answering everything. So thank you so much, and it's great that we connected, and it was a great conversation. I learned so much, during this conversation, which I didn't know, and I've done a lot of these interviews on offshoring and outsourcing, but I had no clue on so many different aspects. So thanks a lot. And yeah, looking to meet you soon and doing some more of these sessions. So anyone who has some more questions can directly write to Anshul, or you can type onto the comment section and probably Anshul can address it later. And thank you everyone for joining in. Thanks a lot for the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chantal. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Anshul.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you. See you. Bye. Bye.